Yes, I've been a practicing dentist for just over 45 years. I was trained at the University of Pennsylvania and graduated in 1973 and practiced uh, general dentistry for 29 years in Lowell, where I grew up. And I had a large practice, and I wanted to concentrate more on aesthetic dentistry as well as dental implants. And that's when I sold that practice and opened Smiles by Design in Lexington on Bedford Street, across from Starbucks. And during that time, I was on the faculty of the Harvard Graduate Clinic for 9 years. I took a 2-year program that met every week at NYU on implant dentistry, and retired in 2018. So that's kind of my background. As far as what I've seen in dentistry over these 50 years, or almost 50 years, has just been extraordinary and unpredictable. The changes, I'll go through with you kind of how it was when I got out of school and I started working for my family dentist in Lowell. If you look at the picture in the middle, that is almost what I had going into dentistry in 73. I did have a high-speed drill. This one shows a motorized rope pulley drill, which was frequently used in the 50s and 60s, a motorized drill, because we only had pneumatic drills coming out in the late 50s. So high-speed drills were just getting rolling in the 10 years when I got out of school. You know, sterilization of instruments. Well, we have you can see on the top right is the type of autoclave that was available to us and that I had in the 70s. And it was permissible, if you look at the top left, to do what's called cold sterilization using benzalkonium chloride as 3 hours in the benzalkonium chloride disinfected, and 12 hours is considered enough time to sterilize instruments. Dental drills typically were cleaned with alcohol, and that was the extent of sterilization of the drills. A lot has changed for the better. Now, on the bottom right, you see a more modern type of sterilization type apparatus that uses intensive pressure to lower the time needed to sterilize instruments to as low as 5 minutes. By altering pressure and temperature, you can totally kill anything viable with modern sterilization.
Excuse me, is the degree of sterilization the same? In other words, what you did in 12 hours in the past gave you the same percentage of bacteria left as the 5 minutes now?
That's what we're told, that was the case, though the benzalkonium chloride, you need to be sure it was all washed off before you put any of those implements in anybody's mouth. But yes, that's what we were told. But today, that type of sterilization is not really acceptable. Now, the reasons why I don't know, but it is not. Now, if you look at the bottom left, you'll see there is a modern sterilization center. It has a unit like the bottom right. It has two units in it. One's a larger one and a small, and one just like the bottom right. It has an ultrasonic to the left of the sink to ultrasonically clean debris that may be on instruments prior to sterilizing them. Typically, they'd go into the sink, and gross stuff would be washed off. They'd go into the ultrasonic, and then they would go into the one of the sterilizers. And on the, I believe on the top right is probably an area for storage of sterilized instruments. Now, this kind of a setup was not what we had in 1973. This is totally different, and it's for the better, not only for the health of the patients, but for the health of the people in the dental office. But that chair you see in the middle, I worked in a chair like that. It did have power going up and down, but if I wanted to recline the patient, I had to do it manually with a lever, and I think it's just totally unbelievable how things have changed.
Who invents the new technologies? Where do they come from?
Well, that's an interesting thing. I would imagine that there are dentists who provide feedback to people in engineering who come up with these improvements. Though I would say that it must be a collaboration between dentists and engineers and companies that make the equipment, like Siemens and Dentalese, and so there's no one asked me to give feedback on what to develop, but things
is there a national organization like NIH that participates in this?
There's the Institute of Dental National Institute of Dental Research, but that's more for clinical improvements. It's not so much for developing equipment. But that's a good question. How does improvements in equipment get developed? I'm sure there are many engineering-minded dentists who are giving feedback to manufacturers.
Can I give you one example?
Yeah.
Yeah, this is George Burnell. And in the 80s, I was manufacturing robotic factory automation equipment. We worked with the dental department at NYU and developed the first robotic equipment to grind. We were grinding rather than printing, grinding teeth to the shape of the original. And we also worked with Tufts University dental department.
Well,
that was done at the university level.
Right. I was getting more down to, I was thinking more along, George, I was thinking more along the basics. How did we get from this old up and down dental chair and reclining to a more modern design? And I think it becomes obvious that this doesn't look like, the chair here doesn't look like a comfortable chair for the patient or for the dentist to work around. And ergonomic thinking people saying, well, what if we made a contoured chairs? I think one of the first contoured chairs was called the dental ease chair, which is still a comfortable chair for a patient to sit in today. And it's actually made in the shape of an S. And it's made a big improvement in comfort, and also because it reclined, it made it easy for the new process of sit-down dentistry, which came into vogue in the 60s. That dentists would be less fatigued if they could sit down and do their work with their patients. So, and yes, George, the development of I'm trying to talk about the things that you just mentioned as we go along. So now here you see a modern, we go from the last picture to a modern kind of setup. This happened to be an endodontic practice, but it is not necessarily dissimilar from a restorative suite. You can see above there's a microscope, a surgical microscope at the top of the picture, which the clinician can pull down and he can look and see. Well, I've been told by endodontists that when they look into their scope, that they can see all the way down to the tip of a root on a tooth they're doing a root canal with the microscope. And the microscope can be used to doing restorative dentistry, and there are some dentists who enjoy using the microscope for that.
Are they looking right through tissue then?
No, they're not looking through tissue, but they can play because they can shoot light down into small spaces and look through magnification. They can see things they could not see with the naked eye. And I mean, I use surgical loops to do my work, and I found that allowed me to see things that prior to wearing surgical loops I never saw before. And you can't fix what you can't see.
Right, but what you're describing probably is very similar to the Da Vinci system that we've been using in the operating room for various urologic and gynecologic surgeries, where there's magnification and multiple degrees of freedom of the instrument beyond what you could do with just your hands. So
Absolutely.
rather than using loops, the device itself does the magnification.
Yeah. Well, in this case here, this isn't same as that, Ed, but you're talking like an endoscopic type thing. But it's truly amazing that if you can't see something, you can't fix something. So the better you can see what needs to be done, the more appropriate you can provide treatment. But you can see the degree of difference. I wanted that to be appreciated in a modern operating setting here. You can see the chair that the operator sits down. Today, every treatment area typically will have a computer set up in it so that the doctor or one of the people helping the assistants can type in information relevant to the service and the patient right there at the operatory. Again, we're talking about changes in dentistry. You go from dental X-ray imaging using papered film, which it's analogous to film in your camera, where you put the film, papered film, by the object you want to get an image from, and you expose it with an X-ray head. And if you see on the left, a slightly nicer chair and an old-fashioned X-ray head. And I did use an X-ray head that looked an X-ray machine that looked very similar to that when I first got out of dental school in '73. And I think that it was not as safe. As a matter of fact, I know it was not as safe as far as scatter radiation as today's X-ray units. But that's what I had when I first got out. And you can see we used to have a dark room, just like when you develop film for your camera, and we'd go in the dark room and we'd unwrap the films we exposed in the X-ray machine, and we dip them in developer and wash water and then fixer. And then after they've been fixed for half an hour, then they'd be washed more, then they'd be dried, and eventually by the end of the day, maybe mounted in an X-ray holder type pattern. Now, today, everything's done electronic, excuse me. I would say 90+% of X-rays in the country are done electronically. You can see on the bottom right, there's an electronic sensor, which will be hooked up to a computer, which is in the operatory, usually hidden away. And you'll see in the middle, these are computerized images that can be generated. On the bottom right, you see an image of teeth that was taken with a camera, not with the X-ray sensor. Above that, you see pictures of lower incisors that were taken with a sensor like you see on the right. And on the bottom left, you see what's called a panoramic X-ray that was taken not with that sensor, but with another machine that has a sensor that will do panoramic shots. And you can combine this all in the patient's chart as separate images, combined images. You can do things like on the top left where you colorize the images to make different contrasts. Kinds of things you can do are truly amazing. And especially when you look at what we had to do on the top to get an X-ray image. And these electronic images generated you need far less X-ray exposure, which is fantastic.
Excuse me, in your experience, it seems to me that you've been able to go from the old to the new and learned it well and gotten used to using it. But have you found that there are a chunk of dentists older than something who have trouble getting into the new technology?
Oh, I would say I had trouble. I mean, but there are people in the office that will help you, and the manufacturers will sell you the products, willing to come in and work with you to get you familiar with things. But yeah, it's, I mean, the kids coming out of school now are already trained on how to use newer technology, and for sure, it's tougher, but one has to stay with the state of the art, and this is the state of the art. And so, yeah, it's tough. It's tough to adapt, but you adapt, and the beauty of it is you get to repeat these procedures often enough so that they become part of your routine.
So,
Anybody? Yeah.
yeah, from a business perspective, when you're thinking about investing in these machines and these new technologies, and they must have some sort of lifespan, just as the equipment that they're replacing. But as you think that through, is this something where you're kind of taking a financial hit in order to keep up with the technology and provide state-of-the-art service to your patients? Or does it kind of work out that the business returns are okay, that it makes you more efficient as a doctor, and you can complete your work more quickly? I'm just interested in how well this works out economically for you.
The potential is that that things will work out for you economically. But for instance, well, when we get into showing computer-aided design, CADCAM, that involves greater investment, the younger you are in your career, the more chance, the better the chance you are to reap the benefits of an investment that could be $150,000. Like, there are certain things that I find interesting, but didn't make sense for me when I was in my 60s to invest in. It depended on what that things like CAD/CAM for me would not be when I was in my 60s, would not be an investment that I feel would have borne significant fruit for me, even though I find it fascinating and would have been glad to have made that purchase if I was like early 50s or in my 40s or even
Do
younger.
you purchase this equipment or lease it?
You can do either or, but it's like purchasing or leasing a car. You're going to pay. So you can do either or.
And a lot of insurance is wrapped up in this stuff too, I would think. And you're getting real-time feedback versus finding out that the imaging that you did with film is no good the next day. So now, they probably dictate that you send over images to the insurance for reimbursement. And there are other people that are concerned, right, on that practice, and it just the latency and the expense of doing it non-electronically probably is a big barrier.
Oh, all of these, insurance claims and the X-rays that you see here, they can all be, things can be captured, attached, sent very easily. You don't have to worry about sending a physical X-ray to an insurance company, which most of them will still accept, of course, but you don't have to worry about X-rays getting lost. Things would get lost when insurance claims would be made, and sometimes you'd have to make duplicates of things. All of that's gone away with the advent of electronic imaging. And then an electronic claim submission, you don't even have to use the mail. If there's any one thing that is good bang for your buck, it's electronic imaging technology, like you're seeing here in this bot in the middle. That's like a no-brainer, and the investment is typically not much more than $10,000 or $15,000 to get the software and the sensor, maybe even 2 sensors. So that's a very reasonable amount of money to commit for what you're getting here. Of course, it's implied that you have to have computers in every treatment room. So you have to have treatment rooms that are set up and suitable for placing computers. But once computers are in the operatories, is untold number of benefits that can be had, not just with imaging, with posting the procedures that are done, with showing videos to patients while they're sitting in the chair. Having computers in the operatories is another low cost investment. You just have to have treatment rooms that are set up to receive the equipment. So sometimes that involved investment in renovations. And if you don't keep your office modern, people don't want to come to you. I mean, so I figured somebody might ask about X-ray exposure, so I just put a little information down there. I think dental imaging involves use of X-rays, and X-rays should be minimized. Today, especially in the days where we're now doing implants and we're doing one-visit root canals oftentimes, without appropriate imaging, keeping it as safe as possible, we can't deliver the kind of services people expect to get. And it would be dangerous. It's sort of like analogous to COVID vaccine, that without it, you might be worried. Some people might be worried, is it safe to have a COVID vaccination? And that's their personal concern. But the benefits to be gained by being vaccinated are so much greater that even a small amount of risk is worth taking. When you're having sophisticated dental procedures done, you need to be able to, the dentist needs to be able to see what the anatomy is in the jaw, especially when we talk about sophisticated work like dental implants. And that involves using some X-ray exposure.
What is CBCT?
That is cone beam computer tomography, which is what will often be done when implant services are being provided. And that involves a slightly larger amount of X-ray exposure, though the new CBCT machines that are coming out are lowering the amount of exposure required for even that. So yeah, but that's another big investment, more than $100,000 investment. But for certain procedures, either having the machine in the office or sending a patient to a facility that might have a CBCT machine is absolute requirement for providing modern implant dental care. Any questions on this? I only put this up there because I thought somebody might have concerns or questions about X-rays.
Yeah, I have one question. What is the unit GY?
Those are grays, I think.
Is that Grays? Okay,
Yeah.
because SV is Sieverts, right?
Yeah, Sieverts is the measurement that I'm most used to seeing is microsieverts. And we're told that having 4 bite wing X-rays taken is about equivalent to normal exposure of ionization radiation in the course of a day or two. And that's the comparison that is often used. Any other questions on that? Okay. Remember, we talked about having the information about a patient available right in the dental operatory where the work is being done. And here you see a screen that could be pulled up, and all the patient information can be accessed from different windows just by a click. And you can see even the restorations can be that a patient has, or restorations that they plan to have, or problems that they have, can all be charted on pictures of teeth. These are generic pictures, but they can be altered to look like the dental problems or the dental work that's in a patient's mouth. Prior to that, we had paper charts, and we wrote everything in pen, and everything was manual, and things could get lost, things could be forgotten. Chances of that are far less now with today's computer system within each room. And of course, all these images, these computers are all networked. So the images can be brought up in other treatment rooms. They can be brought up at the front desk. I had a room just for consultations and for viewing, for showing, presenting patients with treatment planning with using a pull down screen. And of course, all I had to do was plug my laptop in there, and all these images you see here, that could be in the operatory, could be in that consultation room. So it's, and this isn't a big investment, but it's maybe one of those $25,000, $30,000, well, maybe less investments that's absolutely required in a modern dental office. And if it pays for itself. I think you have to pay for software updates every year, but that's just part of the deal. Now, let's go back to ways of we replace teeth. When I was a dental student, we did have cemented bridge work, but oftentimes we were making people removable replacements, like partial denture you see on the right, and full dentures, which is something that is hardly taught now, but a lot of time was spent when I went to dental school learning how to make dentures. And a lot of that has changed. Now today, for those who can afford it, those back teeth where the partial dentures would be typically dental implants. And oftentimes those full dentures could be either connected to dental implants, or there could be a whole set of teeth that utilize dental implants, and we wouldn't need to make a denture at all. But this is what was the state of the art back in the 60s and early 70s and into the 70s. The advent of bonding came out in the 70s and 80s, where we learned that we could repair teeth by etching the enamel of the outer enamel of teeth with a weak acid like phosphoric acid, and we can flow low surface tension plastic into those etching, and we could build teeth up with tooth colored resin material and repair teeth like you see on the left. Prior to that, we would be putting pins in teeth to retain either a plastic material or a porcelain tooth colored material. And these would typically not be aesthetic. And the lifespan would be not too good. So once someone would break their teeth like on the left, the best thing we could do was provide dental crowns, which back in the 60s and 70s had their own issues cosmetically.
How durable is the resin buildup for front teeth like that?
It's remarkably durable, remarkably durable. So in a case like this is an appropriate, where we still have a lot of clinical tooth left, it's an appropriate situation for doing bonding, which when I first got out of school was not available. Going into other dental procedures, like I say, on the left side, you see two teeth that are prepared for crowns. And when there's not much tooth structure, that's required. But let's say there was cosmetic issues or tooth alignment issues, and the person wanted improvement, and we could do more conservative preparations, like on the top left, and do a ceramic facing, porcelain veneers. Those facings can be done with resin, like with what you saw in the previous images, but with the porcelain veneers, we have a ceramic structure that will hold its glaze and color for many, many years, even decades. So those are the kinds of differences between a full crown and porcelain veneers. Porcelain veneers only were developed in the late 80s or mid 80s. Not something that was available back when 50 years ago or 45 years ago when I got out of dental school. Just wanted to go over different types of dental restorations. You know, 50 years ago, the middle top silver fillings were basically what we did to restore teeth, especially in the back of the mouth. Now, even then, you could do, and we did in dental school, gold restorations, gold inlays, which are still a very acceptable way of restoring teeth and have great longevity. But most people today don't want teeth that have gold in them. So they want tooth-colored restorations like you see on the top left. And these restorations could be either ceramic or they could be of a hardened resin, a processed resin material. Either way, they can look like the images on the top left. So there are two alternatives. Plus, resin, as many of you might know, can be placed directly in back teeth today. We had problems initially with placing resins in back teeth when they first came out. And with the advent of bonding adhesives, we've eliminated those kinds of problems where people would get post-operative symptoms from placing bonded fillings in teeth. That was a problem when we first started to do that back in the 90s. You can see on the middle, the first aesthetic crowns had a metal thimble with a ceramic material bonded to it. And we had to deal with the darkness that would come through the metal material and making the image of the tooth not looking natural. In the middle right, you see an all ceramic crowns where there's no metal involved, where light can shine through those restorations and hit the natural tooth and refract and reflect back more like a natural way. So that's been a great improvement. And all of this goes back to our being able to bond things onto teeth or adhere things onto teeth. It's made a great improvement on the longevity of these restorations. Prior, you know, they always had all ceramic restorations for front teeth years ago, but because they weren't bonded to the teeth, the long-term success of those restorations was not high. Now, a lot of people are utilizing lasers in dentistry. Probably the best bang for the buck is soft tissue lasers that can be used for dental hygienists to help clean teeth, and for dentists to do minor surgical procedures. But there are also hard tissue lasers that you can see how it works. The laser beam is aimed at the area that needs to be treated, where the decay is, and it cuts through hard tooth structure quite well. And today, I believe they even can eliminate the soft decay, which had been a problem with earlier laser systems. And, to think, just back in the early 70s, I was, dentists were using motorized drills with a rope. On the lower left, you see a CADCAM system. Now, what can be done now is using camera, you can image the person's teeth, all the teeth in the dental arch. You can image cavity preparations and crown preparations. That information can be then sent either to a dental laboratory, which downloads the information and fabricates the restoration for the patient, or the dental office can have a machine, a milling machine like you see on the bottom left, and the information that is captured goes right to that milling machine, and the restoration can be milled right in the office. It's fascinating to watch. And the success rate with these restorations is very high. The fitting of the restorations is highly accurate, and the delivery can typically be done in one visit if you have a milling machine in the office. But the important thing is that these capturing devices that can be used within the mouth can eliminate the need for dental impressions, and that's something people really appreciate, and a lot of them appreciate being able to get a restoration in one visit. Any questions about this, guys or gals?
So
About how long does it take, David, to mill a tooth using the CAD system?
It's probably about 2.5 hours total, if you include cutting the preparation, imaging it, and delivering it into the tooth. The actual amount of time for the machine to mill the restoration, I don't know that exactly, but that's probably in the area of 30 minutes once you got it, once you get the image captured completely.
is a mill the same thing as a 3D printer? Because I thought I had read
Yeah,
that 3D printer.
Yeah, I think that it's analogous to a 3D printer. Yeah, from what I can tell, it is.
How accurate is the fitting?
David, when I was talking to a friend of mine who's a prosthodontist, they were saying the 3D printers for teeth, and Charlie, this addresses your concern, don't work very well. They don't like to use them because even if the layers for the 3D printing are as small as humanly possible, there's microscopic ridges and they don't look like teeth. They just don't work. You can't machine the ridges out perfectly to make them look good. So the milling machine, I think, takes a solid block of resin and then cuts that down and polishes it. That would be my guess. I have no basis of fact to put that on.
Actually, I had a crown done about 6 months ago, and it was right after George gave his talk about 3D printing. And so I asked my dentist about the tolerances that one can get with 3D printing versus the mill. And the milling machine is a good order of magnitude, much better than 3D printing. And not only that, I think David has talked a little bit about with the with the CAD-CAM system is what you can do on the computer to actually make the crown almost exactly the way that the original tooth was, in terms of all the changes of the angles, the arcs, and so forth. It's amazing what you can do with that computer to get it set to make it exactly the way that you want it. And the time
Agreed.
frame that David talked about is what I saw too. I was in the chair about 2 hours, but 30 minutes for the milling machine to do its job.
So I can enlighten you a bit. When you are making a product, whether it's a tooth or some other product, the surface that you're trying to deal with on the outside is always an issue with 3D printing. You're layering one on top of the other, and so you get these microscopic grooves. So typically there's some kind of finishing, polishing or melting or some other finishing method. So post-processing of the part. However, take a look at what the parts that are on the screen and try milling the inside. Try milling the part that fits over your tooth. That gets a little more complicated. So you can get any shape you want by 3D printing, and you can get into cavity areas that you cannot get into with just grinding. So often you're going to want to use both in your process. I think that's enough for me to talk.
How much of the time when you make the mold, how does that compare in accuracy to
Yeah.
the 3D image that's created?
Jerry, I think you got to speak up. It was hard to hear you.
Also, by the
microphone
way,
up.
it's 11:05 already, and there are a lot of good questions, but I don't know where David is in his presentation.
Yeah, okay. Well, I don't know where the definition of CAD-CAM and what we just and I don't know how. Yeah. Anyway, I think that
The mold versus the CAD
okay.
cam.
Well, okay. Yes, the accuracy has been shown to be at least as good. It's been studies have been shown to show that accuracy has been at least as good, and in most cases better than with rubber impression materials. And that's verified with how little adjustment is needed when one of these restorations is delivered. And the ability to not have to do an impression, it's one of the fears that that a lot of patients have, is having goop put in their mouth and having to have it there for a period of time. And I don't know where I am on my presentation here. I think
David, at that point, to John's point, we officially have 23 minutes according to my clock for the presentation. The fact that you haven't finished is not necessarily bad. So what we can do is go ahead at the speed you're going at, and we can schedule a second session for you to finish up for the rest of it. And that's not a problem in most cases. Is that all right with you?
Well, that's all right with me. But I don't think we have that much more to do unless there's a lot of questions.
Perfect. Let's see where we are at 11:30.
Okay. So why I'm just going through periodontal disease. Periodontal disease is the disease of the supporting structures of teeth. And when you get to now have a situation where we spend a lot of energy developing treatment to save teeth that are severely compromised, when there's a possibility that we might have a better approach to saving, if you have a tooth like in picture number 4, the amount of effort that might go into trying to maintain that tooth, it might be better for everyone if you have an adequate replacement for that tooth, like a dental implant. It might be better long-term for that tooth to be replaced. I could talk forever about dental implants, but the whole idea is that you have a titanium insert that's placed in the jaw, and titanium is very well tolerated by the body, and bone will grow around that insert, and that insert will be an integral part of that patient's jawbone. And the insert has a hollow center where you can put what's called an abutment that comes out of the gums, and then a tooth can go on to that abutment. And it would seem that if you have an advanced periodontal problem, that a better approach of a dental implant is going to be best for you long term. Any questions on dental implants? Because that's a subject that we could go on and on and on on.
Just quickly,
Does that
David.
dental
Go ahead, Dick.
Does
I think
that dental implant have a nerve?
No, the implant is a inorganic titanium substrate, and it does not. But the living bone that grows around it is alive. So,
How does the tooth keep its color then?
The color comes from the crown part of the tooth. So you see in this image, you see two things. You see a bottom part, the titanium implant in the jaw, and you see the image of a tooth. The tooth gets luted to the abutment, which is, you don't see in this image, which goes into a hollow center in the implant. And then the tooth colored restoration is made to go onto that abutment. Again, you don't see the abutment in this image.
How long do you have to wait for the bone to grow into around the titanium implant before you can put the crown part in?
Minimal of 6 weeks. But most of the time, by the time the crown is fabricated, usually several months has gone by.
David, in this picture, it looks like you have splinted teeth. Is that typically the case for
No, I just grasped this this image, and no, it's not typical. As a matter of fact, they would not be attached. But if, let's say, you didn't want an implant, you could have an attach, and this is what we typically used to do. You'd have the molar on the right and the premolar on the left, and there'd be a space, and those 3 crown units would be attached. But now with the implant, we would not have to attach those 3 teeth at all. All right. Oh, well, yeah, we got more. Orthodontics, boy, this is another big change in dentistry. You know, when you're if you had braces back in the 50s, the orthodontist would have to take metal band material and fit it to every single individual tooth. And that was a lot of work and a lot of discomfort for the young patient oftentimes. Well, that was fitted, and those would be tack, that material would be tack welded and fitted for each tooth. And the art would be how skilled the clinician is, the orthodontist is, in bending wire to make teeth move up, down, tilt them, and it required a lot of skill. Now, today, if you see on the lower right, we have bonded brackets, and we can use a straight wire of different diameters, starting with a light diameter, and all of the things that you would have to incorporate in bending wire to straighten teeth could all be incorporated within the bracket. All the tilts and torques, and depending on the prescription that you wanted to use, because there's different theories on what is the most stable position for teeth, but you can prescribe that and buy those brackets. And if you position them in the proper place on the teeth, with bonding, like we talked about how beautiful bonding has changed dentistry, you could then put a straight wire, starting with a very light straight wire, into those brackets, and the teeth automatically straighten themselves. No crazy wire bending and complicated soldering and welding, and it's amazing. Any questions on how modern orthodontic brackets work? No? Okay. So all the technology is built in to the center of this bracket. We call it a twin bracket because it has two. And this is how you can get good control of torque.
David, you say that the brackets are bonded to the teeth. Is there how do those brackets get taken off the teeth? I mean,
we typically, you can take them off with a pair of anything that can, like a pair of small cutting pliers that you can, if you can get, grab an edge on the top and an edge on the bottom, and just squeeze the plier and it pop right off.
Huh.
Yeah. Wow. You still have a little bonding glue to clean off the teeth, but they pop off easy.
These are truly amazing pictures as a person who lived in the 50s and had all this stuff done in the 50s. And I think about, I'm having flashbacks to sitting in the dentist or the orthodontist chair and not knowing what was going on. Wow, this is amazing stuff.
It truly is
Harry,
amazing.
Harry, if the bonding doesn't come off, you just get an implant.
Oh, I see.
You can even, let's say a tooth is moving in a way that you're not happy, the dentist isn't happy, the dentist could just pop it off, clean the tooth off, rebond the bracket in a slightly different position, tie the wire back in, and move the tooth the way the doc wants to. I mean, when you compare it to the way things were done in the 50s, my hat's off to those doctors, those orthodontists that went through that. Now, today, Everybody wants to know if they can get the teeth straightened without any brackets. And it could be, depending on their bite problem, it could be that they could utilize aligning therapy. Now, dental aligners, if you start with imaging either through impressions or through intraoral imaging, the bad bite, the malocclusion, and then there's a program that will create small movements every 2 weeks. And you can see how the teeth position could change every 2 weeks a little bit better. And at that point in the image, in the movie of the teeth moving, you can create these plastic overlays that will push the teeth in that direction. There are always these aligner therapy, like with Invisalign, works best with teeth that have more or less problems with tilting. It doesn't work out ideally with severe crowding cases. It does not work out well when there's skeletal deformities associated with the bad tooth positioning. And it really should be in the hands of a doctor. It shouldn't be someone mailing off a picture from their iPhone to a company that generates aligners, which is being done. And should not be legal, but because of the way, because it's considered a cosmetic improvement, the FDA does not crack down on it. So it's interesting. Any questions on dental aligners? We showed we showed images of how microscopes can be an aid in endodontics and in restorative dentistry. The CBCT machine you see here on the left creates these images. You can see panoramic images. You can see the images on the top middle where you can actually, the clinician can draw in the position of the nerve and blood vessel that is in the jaw, because that's something, it's important not to disrupt the integrity of the nerve and the blood vessel. Could that be a serious problem when doing dental implants? You can also see on the bottom right, sagittal slices of a jawbone, so that the clinician in planning where implants go can see exactly where they have to put them and how thick the bone is, and therefore what size diameter implant to use. So this kind of imaging, when you're doing sophisticated implant work, is absolutely important. And it's a big expense, typically in the area of $150,000 machine. So you
Does this
should
mean
be.
that it has to be a dedicated practice?
No, it does not. As a matter of fact, you can do routine. On the top right, you can get a routine panoramic X-ray from this machine, just like, so you don't have to have this degree of imaging. And but if you don't do a significant amount of implant work, it's hard to justify an investment like this.
It seems to me that the advantage of a group practice, I mean, when I started going to a dentist, it was one dentist. Now the dentist that I go to, there are 3 or 4 of them. And that way you can take $100,000 of hardware and spread it across more dentists.
Absolutely, absolutely, and that's a trend. Being solo practitioner is something that you're going to see less and less of.
Your mouth.
Okay,
I've got a little treat for you, Robin.
Talk about
Bring in Stephen
impressions.
Baldwin's mold for Doug to look at. Open wide. All right, now bite down. And, okay. Through your nose.
So this is one of the things that imaging technology can eliminate. A lot of people have fear about having their mouth space invaded. And dental impressions are such an invasion, and having imaging technology to eliminate that can be a big game changer. So let's see. I think what we'll do is we'll play one more video here.
All right, guys, now I'm gonna show you, demonstrate you a full arch scan, upper and lower, and the bite. First off, we have to fill out the RX one more time, and I just type something in to make this a little bit faster. And in this particular case, I'm gonna choose not the restorative, I'm gonna choose the eye record. Okay, we all good? I'm gonna put my notes in. This is just a test, and I'm going to go ahead and go to my scanner. So first I'm going to do is I'm going to start on the upper or the lower, it doesn't really matter, but I'm going to start on the upper. I get my camera in position. Again, I'm going to be at the terminal molar right on top of it on the occlusal, making sure I capture everything, move cheek side a little bit, and then come forward. Okay, making sure I capture the tip of the teeth. Okay, and then also roll over to the buccal, and I'm going to come back on the buccal side, and I never go back. I just stay where I am. So now I have to switch hands, go back on the opposing. And that's it. Okay, so I finished my upper, and I have a lot of problems here. I haven't captured quite some sections, so I'm gonna go in and hit my fill button, and now the computer is calculating and telling me what needs to be covered. It takes a while for the computer to get in that mode because it's a lot of data I'm missing, so I have a couple of holes here, over here. This is really not that big of a deal, but these three are. I'm gonna go ahead and get my camera in position, trying to find the spots. I'm gonna start scanning, and as you can see, they have changed colors already, and now they're all good. Great, I'm happy with this. The next one I'm gonna do is my lower. Start on the terminal, coming forward. I cannot go too fast or too slow, so I have to really have the right pace. Move over to the lingual, coming down my lingual, and I'm rolling over to the buccal. And hit my buccal down. Good. Now I'm going to look at my results. Looking good. I like it. And the next section I'm going to do is my bite on both sides. So first I'm going to put my camera in position, making sure everything is okay. I'm right there. I'm scanning it. So number one is done. It's all purple. Now I'm going to go on the other side and capture my bite over here. Move one tooth forward, and I stop. All done. Wonderful. I'm happy with my scan. I'm going to go ahead and look at the results. The computer is again processing. Remember, 6,000 images per second. That's a lot of data. And I just want to make sure I have everything. I have my bite, and also I'm going to look at my occlusal clearance, making sure everything is good right there. So the results are coming in, and that's where we are right now. I'm going to go ahead and look at my clearance. Looks good on the upper. Yep, and the lower as well. Looks great, and I'm going to go ahead and send it to the lab. Thank you.
So a question about silver fillings, if I may.
Sure, sure.
So I think that the amalgam had mercury in it, and I always wondered about the purpose of that and the toxicity of mercury. What was that all about?
Well, we all know that mercury as an individual metal is poisonous, but mercury as an alloy in combination with copper and tin is safe because it's not free mercury. So as an alloy, there is no safety issue. As a metal, mercury is very toxic.
The higher toxicity was to the dentist when they were actually using the mercury, because they would manually create the emulsion of the mercury alloy by putting the metals in their hand and manually massaging it to create a pliable mass that then could be inserted into the tooth. And so mercury poisoning was a big deal to dentists early on, as was X-ray poisoning, when the dentist used to hold the film up against the tooth when they were taking the X-ray. A lot of fingers got burnt off.
Absolutely, that's true, Peter. That's absolutely true. I'm not sure the degree of risk of the mercury when the amalgam was prepared, but the potential was there, more so than for the patient.
Yeah. As we spoke earlier, my father-in-law was a dentist. He was actually a dentist in the Army in the field during World War II. And he said, his peers, a lot of people had mercury problems. Not a lot, but a significant number.
Thank you for answering that. It was always a mystery to me. And the other question I had is more historical. We all know, or we all have heard, that you used to go to the barber to have your teeth pulled. And at some point, modern dentistry took over. And I wondered if you knew that history, roughly when that happened. And was it a swift transition, and what really instigated it?
I don't know. I know that most dental schools got started in the late 1800s. Before that, it was more a craft. And like you say, barbers are people who decided they wanted to do dental work, which was typically extractions, would be involved. And then exactly when things changed over, I think I'd have to say, if I'm to guess, in the late 1800s.
When you went to dental school, did they teach you how to cut hair?
As a matter of fact, we wore.
Hey, this is a family show. Let's leave it that way, please.
We wore our hair so long in those days. It was. If you look.
So you had to do dentistry because there's no hair to cut.
Hey, Ken, to answer your question more seriously, barbers were originally the original surgeons. They did all this stuff, And one of the reasons the barber pole is a red and white stripe is alluding to bloodletting, going back to when they used to do medical procedures.
Wow.
And so, the whole thing evolved from, from the original barber type stuff to the various disciplines that we have today. Also, the interesting question that someone talked about, group practices. Dental economics became an interesting issue when that happened too. Not only are you sharing the cost of expensive equipment with multiple users, you're also sharing the cost of a practice with multiple specialists. And you have less tension between the various specialties, which tend to overlap a little bit in modern dentistry.
David, where do you see some of the major innovations coming about in the future?
Well, I wish I had a crystal ball, but anything that involves imaging, for sure, that'll become more sophisticated, more and more part of dentistry. So there'll be less and less dental impressions. As far as, I think you'll always see less and less decay teeth. You'll notice it on your kids and grandkids, and that's mostly due to the fact that we have fluoride dentifrices and fluoride in our water supply, which many of us didn't have growing up. What happens is the fluoride ion replaces a hydroxyl radical in a hydroxyapatite crystals in the enamel of teeth, and it makes it less, it makes it impervious, more impervious to acids produced by bacteria that are typically responsible for tooth decay. And you're going to see less and less. I mean, we already see, even with kids whose hygiene isn't good and who have a lot of sugar, which is the substrate of strep mutans, which is the primary causative agent of dental decay. We see those kids not getting dental decay. So with less teeth being lost to decay, there are less need for prosthetic replacements, less need for dental root canals. So that's kind of where the future is. I think what I'd like to see is I'd like to see these kinds of sophisticated services being provided for every person in the country. And I'd like to see them provided in the third world countries. That's what I would like to see the future go. And I hope we can get there eventually.
I have two comments. One of them is, pardon me, is the first thing that I would mention that is a big difference in dentistry today is the picking between the teeth to get rid of the plaque and stuff like that. You know, and because you you alluded to it when you said the pneumatic drill, high-speed drill, and it's water cool. That made life much more bearable, you know, for young kids, and especially me too, because you know, the lady or the man was tug and pull, etc., like that. You know, it was a lot of work. And the other thing is, I think good dental health is very significant to your overall physical and mental health.
Absolutely. We define self-imaging and how we appear. And if your smile is not good, you're self-conscious, and people will make judgments that aren't necessarily fair based on how physical appearance is.
Unless you live in Great Britain.
That's true. I do the same thing, you know, and then you got to stop and think. Not everybody, you know, is as well off as you or has the ability, et cetera, et cetera. You're right.
Absolutely. That's
David, if
absolutely.
you stop sharing, everybody can see everybody at this point, if you're done with the presentation.
Okay, okay.
And there was one question from Dan Silber in the chat. He's asking, sealants were popular in the 80s. Are they still considered effective?
Yeah, sealants are still effective and they're still popular. And we tried to get parents to seal their kids, at least the kids' molars, because that's the most common area where there might be getting decay in the top part of the back teeth. And yeah, and sealants is still very important.
Oh, yeah. I have one more comment for you, which is a little bit maybe off the wall. But every time I go to the dentist and I watch him, make the amalgam, et cetera, he reminds me of a materials engineer in the dental field. Because material engineering I'm a retired engineer, was very, very important in the development of, the electronics business.
Yeah, I'll tell you, I think dental materials, when I took it in school, I said, why do I have to learn this about slip planes and things like that? And then I think when I finally got through with that course, I just let that go out my mind. And sometime during the 80s, I started thinking how important dental materials and the properties of dental materials are to having successful results. And I rebought the most modern dental materials textbook I could get, and I reread it in a fashion that with an exuberance that I did not have when I was a student.
And dental adhesives also are a big deal. If you could just figure out what albacores do, everybody'd be happier.
Well, we had,
Go ahead.
50 years ago, we didn't have dental adhesives, and that's been sort of the fire that started everything.
This is not a technical question, but what is the status of dental insurance, and what is it that will bring the coverage of dental care into the same sphere as the coverage of medical care? It seems that is gotten to be sort of something, I don't know. I mean, I never had dental insurance because I was not born in the era where that was had. And now I'm, seeing the expense of taking care of one's teeth is enormous compared to my medical expenses. Any thoughts on that?
Well, the history of dental insurance is it was kind of like a loss leader thing thrown in to companies when they would purchase medical insurance, and it slowly developed into a more and more significant role with people, and generally they used it as one of the negotiations for improving benefits with employers. And so I think from what I can tell, the future will be more and more people will be covered by dental insurance. At least that's, if we keep electing Democrats, it will probably go in that direction.
Hey, Harry, your Freudian slip was probably prescient in that dental insurance, like mental health insurance, like vision insurance, at some point in time, you really have to look at insurance, health insurance, holistically. Your body is your body. Everything is a complex, everything works together, et cetera, et cetera.
Also, as new technology is applied, the dentistry and vision vision treatments become more expensive. And insurance plays a role in this, does it not?
Absolutely.
Yeah, insurance makes it more expensive too, because they get the best rates, and that sort of perverted everything. People used to pay out of pocket for their doctor and their dentist, and things were, a little bit more sane on the pricing. Now the insurance company has to get a better rate than anybody, so they inflate everybody else's rate up.
Well, they have to get their piece of the action.
Well, I
They
was
have to
just
justify their premiums, right? So they force you to get insurance, even though you can pay for it out of pocket.
I was just referring to the impact of the cost of the new equipment and all that, some of which doesn't it get passed along to the patients or the insurance companies, David?
Of course.
Yes, of course. It has to. And there's where one of the rubs is when you sign a contractual agreement like with Delta Dental to deliver a service at a certain fee, yet to provide that service, especially now after COVID, to provide that service, it's become more and more expensive, but you're tied into a contractual fee with I'm just saying Delta Dental. So that does create a friction between the dentist and the insurance carrier and the patient.
So there are a couple of factors. One, if you have an insurance policy, then the amount that goes to the dentist is less than if it's open market, because whether it's dental insurance or any other, if you don't have insurance, the billing is much higher, sometimes more than twice as much. Now, some dentists won't take the insurance. So you might have to, as I did, actually change dentists in order to have your insurance accepted. But the other side is on the cost. Although you have more sophisticated equipment, you end up having less time with the dentist because the services that you get, the fluorides that protect your teeth, the type of dental care that you get means that your teeth last a lot longer without care. So you don't have to visit as often. Fundamentally, just keeping your teeth clean twice a year goes a long way towards your dental care.
Yeah, some of what dentists used to do is now being handled by hygienists and other specialists within the office.
Now, the first picture that he showed that David showed in his presentation with those two cracked teeth are almost my picture, and that happened in the 4th or 5th grade. And the dentist, with that old-fashioned grinding machine, spent 8 visits of an hour apiece to grind my teeth down to a shape that he could put a pin in one side and a cap in the other. And I managed to lose it or break it at least once a year till I got in the Air Force. And I haven't had to have anything done to it since the Air Force dentist fixed me up.
Well, probably the technology had improved by the time you got to the Air Force, and you got the benefit at that point.
Right.
I was told by my dentist maybe 20 years ago when I asked him about the change in business. He said back in the 1960s, the average dentist got 70 or 80% of their income from drilling teeth and fixing cavities. And that once fluoride came in, 2 things had to happen. One is that the number of dentists, he said, dropped by something like 50%. And the second is that the dentists who remained had to find other things that they could do that were lucrative, and things like making teeth white and putting in replacement teeth and a variety of other things took the place of just the drilling and putting in fillings.
Of course, that's true. And, you know, with advent of implants, more could be done for more people. And if they can afford it, that's another issue. And people are more concerned with cosmetics. Back in the 50s, they were just happy enough to have teeth.
And David, the one way we know whether or not a talk is successful is whether or not the Q&A just keeps on running. And obviously people have had a lot of questions. So thank you very much. Excellent job. Wonderful videos. And I remember what it was like when I had to close my mouth for 3 minutes until the pink goop hardened on my teeth.
Well, that's one of the things imaging is going to eliminate.
David, thank you so much. Good job.